Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 242. And yes, as you guys are ramping up and joining us, got a special guest, Rachel Coughtry. And
Hello.
yeah, can you guys just say something there, Rachel? Just talk, whatever.
Sure. Happy to be here. Definitely out of my element, but doing my friend Gary here a favor today. So hopefully it goes well.
So, speaking of out of your element, thank you very much because I had to really coax Rachel to come on here, but you've already had a hi and a friendly hey from
Hey, Gary.
Carrie. So Carrie, good to see you on here. And by the way, if you wonder what that background is, that's our new offices, Savona Mill, that we're just about to finalize the lease and then begin construction. So say something again so that people can see what's going on.
Oh, yeah. So this is the space. That'll be sort of our reception area. We got to go tour it earlier this week with the majority of the Camden team here in Charlotte. So it's exciting. It's nice to have something fresh to look forward to.
Yeah, yeah. So as if we didn't have enough on our plates, I'm helping lead that project too. But nonetheless, we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome in the workplace. And guess what? It's not just for CEOs and leaders, it's kind of for everybody. And I call it the silent assassin because I don't know anybody that's actually died from imposter syndrome, but I know a lot of people that have died on the inside from it. And I have too. So the good news is we have some practical tools that we've learned along the way through highs and lows, mostly through the lows. That seems to be the training ground. But before we go into that, there is one thing that I do want to address because I got this yesterday, and this is regarding a another. Let's see, where are you, Jamie? Here we go. There's grant opportunity for Western North Carolina small businesses up to $50,000 that's available. So if you or anybody you know is in Western North Carolina, here's kind of the thing. Grants up to $50,000 with business revenue of $1 million or less. So definitely smaller businesses. They can apply for up to, businesses with less than $1 million or less or 25,000, but anybody else 50,000. All right. So sorry about that. Funds can be used for recovery and reopening expenses, including repairs and physical damage replacement, environmental cleanup, rent or mortgage payments, and employee retention and hiring. Okay. So that's a really important thing. We sent this out yesterday to probably you if you're on here, if you're on our distribution list. Um, so, who can apply? Small businesses with annual revenues of $2.5 million or less. So, that's the cap. Businesses located in one of the 28 counties or the eastern band of Cherokee Indians um, covered under President Biden's federal disaster declaration or Dogwood Health Trust's 18 county footprint. So applications opened up on January the 31st. You must apply by February 21st to be considered in round two. So don't wait. The funding is limited. And if selected, you'll be asked to provide additional business details. So that's probably the most urgent thing that we need to talk about. There's plenty of falderall to talk about with what's going on in Washington and what does that mean for businesses and all that. But I'm going to save that powder for next week because that'll be really fun with with Adam and also with Jack. But we want to go into imposter syndrome today. And not just talk about it, like, but like, what do you do and what are some practical things in dealing with it? So, if anybody saw this post that I put up a day or so ago, It is true that statistically speaking, they say at least 70% of the population deals with this imposter syndrome. And we'll talk a little more about like what is it. I think it's actually higher than that based on my experience. I know I did for a long time, probably as early as age 10 is when I probably really started feeling it. Perfectionism, comparison, all that kind of stuff. So, just to find out what the temperature of the room is, I'm launching a poll. So people are still kind of getting on here, but I do want to see where the temperature of the room is. So here is the poll. I'm looking for 100% participation because these are very simple yes no questions, and I will not call you out. So, um, first question is, are you familiar with what imposter syndrome is? It's either a yes or no. And if you don't, that's fine. Um, Thank you for the two people that have answered. Come on, keep going. Let's keep going. Um, the second question is do you or have you silently struggled with feelings of inadequacy in over your head, or if people knew the real story about you, they would reject you? Ooh, that's a big one. Keep going. You guys are doing good. Um, it's fun to watch these polls materialize. And the third one is, do you ever struggle with comparing your behind the scenes reels with everybody else's show reels? Or not everybody, but think about competitors, people that, you've admired or whatever. Uh, thank you guys. Keep going. Let's get a few more in here. I think this is really interesting. Um, this is really interesting. So let's see if we can get 10 people. We're at 8. Come on, y'all. I'm not going to coax you all much longer. Um, so here, I don't know, like, let me see. Rachel, are you seeing these results?
No, I don't see them. It says I'm not allowed to vote either.
Well, no, yeah, you shouldn't be. And I'm not voting either. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Basically, oh, we've got a couple more. All right. I'll give you 30 more seconds. So I'm going to just write these down just in case. Uh, the answers to the third one are fascinating. That's good. It's probably a good thing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Good job, guys. We had 11 of you guys, so that we had 100% participation because there's just two of us as hosts. So that is pretty doggone good. Oh, let me see here. No, we had nine. Nine. Two of you guys are underachievers. So I'm going to share the results right with you right now. All right. Can you guys see this? You see in the poll? Isn't that interesting? 67% knows something about it. So almost 70, rounded up, right? 67%, almost 70, deal with it. Statistically speaking, that's kind of interesting. And then this is what's interesting to me. Like 67% don't struggle with comparing behind the scenes reels with show reels. What that would tell me is the majority of the people on this audience, in this audience, are not Gen Zs. And they're not doing a bunch of selfies on TikTok. You might be, but what I've been reading from people that have written to me after they've read my book, and this isn't a shameless plug for my book, it's just about I'm fascinated by the subject because I suffered from it for way too long, and it feels so good to not suffer from it. But it's running rampant with our young folks and through college, et cetera, because they are on social media, whether it's Snapchat or whatever, And the peer pressure that think back to when you were in junior high, was there comparison going on? Rachel, when you were in junior high, probably playing volleyball, was there any comparison going on in your world?
Maybe just the slightest bit, but it was only with the people like in your proximity, like your small circle. So, they tended
Yeah.
to look like you or act like you or do some of the same stuff, or their houses probably resembled yours too. Where now, like you said, social media.
Yeah, social media is just throwing fuel on the fire. I mean, we had three channels plus channel 8, which was really fuzzy, which was PBS or whatever. It was Sesame Street. That's what we had. So that was, we didn't have media really as a kid or whatever much. You know, payphones were still a thing in college when I was, I would call my folks, let it ring once, then ring twice, and they knew that I had gotten to my destination. So, if I had traveled somewhere, it's very different. But nonetheless, like I think that the tendency to compare with other people is a big deal. So for the 30% of you that did not know or really weren't that familiar with what imposter syndrome is, I'll just give you a little brief history. So it was actually coined by two female psychologists in the 1970s. So about when I was 10 years old, and I think it was in 72, that they observed this phenomenon happening among high achieving female clients of theirs, okay? High achievers, but females, and they were plagued by these feelings and thoughts of I'm in over my head, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not that good. Any success I've had was just because I was lucky. um, if people just knew this or that about me, they would reject me. So that's where question number 2 came in this poll, which is like, if you've ever felt that way, that's called imposter syndrome. And it's not a medical condition, but it is a mindset condition. And what happens with it is then we start withering. Like we just start withering, and we don't we aren't allowing ourselves to become our best selves. So that's kind of it in a high level nutshell. And so this book talks about 7 weapons that I found throughout the course of my life, and I wish I would have known about them earlier because there's some really simple ones. Like number 1 is, hey, just realize you're not alone. But we all think that we are, and we hide stuff. We don't talk about it because we're embarrassed. So, but one of the practical tools that we've seen do a lot of good in helping tamp down imposter syndrome in the workplace is, so if 70% of the population is dealing with it, that means likely at least 70% of your population in your workforce and your employee base is dealing with this, and nobody's talking about it. Now, it's not, you know, like I said, a life-threatening disease, but it is a threatening issue because you can't be your best person or best self because of it. People are driven, especially Hollywood people, high achieving CEOs like Tana Green. Um, Her book is really worth getting. It's called Creating a World Difference. She was actually the impetus for me writing this book, quite frankly. And if you know Tana Green, you know she's one of the top female CEOs in the country, probably, but certainly in Charlotte. Amazing, purpose-driven leader. And she told me, I think it was maybe when we were getting ready to have her on our podcast, so that was almost 5 years ago. Um, she said, Gary, I don't know what I'm doing, like quietly and ashamedly, like, and I had the privilege of being able to coach her and her team as they were at an inflection point and growing. She had 10,000 employees at the time. I mean, like, are you kidding me? And she was doing that without even a full-time CFO. It was just mind-blowing. I said, Tana, why would you say that? And she said, I only have a 2-year secretarial degree. Mm. And this book that she talks about, like, it's an amazing short book, but it tells her story. And what she did is she put a spotlight on the stuff that she had kept hidden for so long, even while she was a member, and she still is, of WPO, Women's Presidents Organization. Um, Things like she was pregnant at age 15, had a child out of wedlock, had the baby, got beaten up by the dad, her husband, who put her in the hospital. He beat her up so badly after she had the baby and abandoned her and the baby. I mean, like, then she gets a GED. She didn't want to get a GED, so she goes back to high school and finishes 2 years later with baby in tow. And she wanted to go to college, but she didn't have the money for college, so she had a 2-year secretarial track that she went. Well, she exposed all the stuff that she had kept hidden for a long time. That takes tremendous courage. But and so I said, Tana, what was that like? Like for you to put that in this book, and it's a beautiful book. She said it was terrifying. But she said what was amazing is it how it freed me up and it freed up many other people because she speaks all over the place. That she's actually in an exhibit in I think Los Angeles on domestic abuse, and her story is pretty amazing. So that's why I was like, wait a minute. Pretty much every CEO that I've either coached or that has confided in me or that I've worked for where they drop their guard has dealt with this. So, like, okay, got to do it. But what we want to talk about is like not just the leaders. Yeah, it's important for the leaders to be healthy, but it's important for the leaders to understand like what's happening with their people. So one of the things that I really wanted to do a little bit deeper dive on with Rachel in particular because she's lived it, and I want Rachel's perspective and experience because she heads up our HR department and she is an atypical, anything but typical HR leader. She is not the Gestapo, which most HR leaders I've experienced, like, oh, hey, I thought I could trust you. And then all of a sudden they, you confided in them, this or that, and then they turned on you and weaponized to get against you. Like, whoa. She's not that. She's just the opposite. And I want to talk about how you got into that role, but I want to go to whatever you're willing to share, Rachel, about this exercise called Thrive With Her that we did shortly after I came to BGW almost 6 years ago.
Sure. So when you first came, I was strictly in just a marketing role and had one of the partners that had been a couple at the time had sort of given me some overall leadership, but I hadn't really had like a real boss acting in that way for me for a while. And I'd already had the pleasure of getting to work a couple events with you before you came on board. So I kind of knew, okay, I know who Gary is. I've interacted with him some. But I went back and looked at my notes, and I think you started in June of 2019, and my first Thrive List
Correct.
I have is from August of 2019. So like it didn't take long for you to
No,
be like, hey, let's do this exercise. And I remember, I mean, I can remember sitting in your office and being like, hey, just stream of conscience, think about what do you what do you love? What do you enjoy? What have you done? And then you're like, wow, that day went by really fast. Versus what are the things that you're just like, I have to do that again. And so, in true Gary fashion, I think you said, we all still have to clean the toilets, but let's figure out, kind of what we still like and don't like and how we can kind of make that work between the two of us. And so, because I don't know how to be anything but honest, I was very honest in the exercise with myself and then in communicating it to you. But I think there are probably two main things that were in my wither that I remember you being like, I'll do that. That's easy for me. Um, And one of them was anything related to graphics or visual needs or anything sort of artistic, any imagery, that kind of stuff. For anybody who knows me very well knows that I was not blessed with that gift. However, thankfully Gary was. And so I had said, I just kind of freeze and I'm like, I don't even know. I have no clue. And you're like, I'll take that. That's playtime for me. You've had a background in advertising and all kinds of stuff and being a designer yourself. So it was something that you said that you enjoyed, and I very enjoyed handing you that task. But it was also something you were willing to do for me to lighten my load, which I greatly appreciated. The other one was really networking, which is obviously part of why we brought you on in general, was to connect and to meet people and to drum up sales, to get our name more out there. And that is, again, not my strong suit. You want to talk about withering very quickly, just go ask me to meet with 5 people in one day. Like, you will just physically drains me. I need to take the next day as PTO because it takes a lot out of me. And you were like, yeah, I got that. Like, that's all me. That's not something that you need to feel the pressure of doing. But then I also remember thinking, it was either in that conversation or shortly thereafter, you were like, hey, probably I should have the budget, but you've got it already. Can you keep it? Like, are you okay to own that? And I was like, yeah, sure. So it was, there was enough sort of a back and forth that I didn't feel I was burdening you, because I felt like I was giving you my responsibilities, but I also felt like something that you could have owned in your role. You were also like, hey, this is fine unless there's a problem. Like, I'm still going to let you own this and run this being the budget, which I still own that budget today. And you will still call me up and be like, hey, I want to spend some money here. What do you think about this? Let's talk about it. So I think that I appreciated that that's sort of how you led our relationship, and even just starting off working together of, hey, let's figure out how we can both sort of do the things that we like to do, yet the firm is still benefiting overall.
Oh, that's so good. So for anybody that's wondering, what in the world are you talking about? I'm going to give you a quick high level view of this T chart that I developed, and I'm sure somebody developed something like it way before I did, but it's called Thrive Wither. So it's just this: thrive and wither. And you just write the stuff that makes you come alive on the thrive side, start with that, and then you move to the wither side. I had to do that out of necessity because I had to leave my own firm that had my name on the door, and at the ripe old age of 32, and I had turned it around. So I was like, yeah, at 28. So I hated leaving this place, but I caught my partner embezzling money. And um, I knew I had to leave Wichita, Kansas. That was the issue. Because I didn't want to destroy him. I didn't want to out him, because it would have destroyed his life. And I didn't want to destroy my name. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I just had to write, like, what's important to me. So I also included stuff like, all right, so I'm going to have to leave Wichita. Otherwise, because this is a small town. I mean, it's 400,000 people. It's not, and in our industry, everybody knew each other. So I wrote things like, it was important for me to be at a place where my family could thrive. And they were young. My kids were 4 and 7. And my mentor was in New York City, and he split time between there and Minneapolis. And he was a legend in the advertising world. His name is Ron Anderson. And he was just saying, you need to come to New York or be with me in Minneapolis. And like, I love this guy. He was my mentor, but I couldn't see my family in either one of those places for a number of reasons. And so that was in my thrive column, and also in my wither, like, what, like, I can't see us living in a place that we're far away from family. So those are things that were in this first edition of the Thrive Wither, which is very simple. And then what I found since then is that we all do SWOT analysis, right? So strengths, weaknesses, we all look at that. But rarely do we look at what actually makes us come alive. And what I found since I started coaching in 1998, which I had no intentions of ever coaching anybody. But I was brought into a firm that had multiple locations. The CEO was trying to figure out what to do, brought his management team in. We did it for another friend. And what I found since that point is a lot of times we put people into roles that because they're good at something. Oh, hey, you're really good at pivot tables. But what we didn't realize, and they haven't even realized yet, is they're sick of it. They're sick of pivot tables. Maybe they became proficient because they had to, or maybe they just burned out on it. Danger. And or the other thing that we do is we'll look at roles, and I want to talk to you, Rachel. So I'm going to give you a little heads up here. I want you to think about how we've changed our approach in from evaluating talent and even fitting them into roles, how we've modified based on Thrive With Her. So where I'm going with this is a lot of times we will have somebody work up a job description. This is what it is, and it usually the expectations are a combination of Einstein, Mother Teresa, Elon Musk, like whatever. Like we want all these things that are usually unrealistic in the role, and the candidate has a number of those things, but not all of them. But the expectation is still for all of them. So I want you to think, like, back to you, Rachel, how, like, talk to the audience about how we've used this starting, like, you were my guinea pig at BGW. And then we took it to the leadership team. And then we tried rolling it out to everybody. But I want you to think about people like Liz Korskin and other people, how we've created roles based on Thrive With Her, and also how we're evaluating new people.
Sure. Um, while I don't think it was 100% responsible for getting me to the HR role, and I think we'll kind of talk about what got me there later in the conversation, it was absolutely a part of it. And sort of, even for myself, the transition for me between the roles within the firm, again, having that honest evaluation of myself of what actually am I enjoying?
Yeah.
What is draining me? Um, but I mean, we did, like you said, we did it with Liz. Liz is very, very good at the process world. Something that I will absolutely admit she does a better job of than I do. And so even just kind of figuring out those things around, the sales and onboarding process for us. Liz is now the owner of that. And oh my goodness, our process has actually been complimented by some clients going through it and saying, hey, we want to learn how you're doing it because we think so highly of what you've put us through that we want to mimic that in our own business. So again, what Gary and I were probably doing before was fine and getting the job done, and clients were getting on board. It's not like it wasn't happening. I can also confidently say it's a lot better now that
Oh yeah.
we've listened to the Liz's in this instance of, hey, these are things that I like doing. I like the process. I like getting stuff from start A to Z, and making sure we've got the steps and everybody knows the steps and we're trained on the steps. And then standardizing that across everybody in the firm. So it's not just like, yeah, well, these three people do it, but these three people don't. So bringing that unity and unification across the board for us has been huge. And that is a direct result of listening to the Thrive With Her, for instance, in this case, Liz.
Yeah. Yeah. So give us a little bit more backstory on what Liz was doing. And she's basically created multiple roles and her own role, but she's created multiple roles in the company based a lot on that. So talk a little bit
Right.
about that.
So we got Liz through an acquisition. Win for us, yay. Um, But when she first came in, she had been doing some marketing for that firm. She had been helping from an administrative side. I think she'd even probably been helping processing and assembling their returns and getting the stuff out to clients and some client communications. Um, but through conversations with Liz and Adam and Gary and myself, and kind of letting her sort of fine tune some things, she sort of realized this need for what we call a quarterback coordinator. So we call them a QBC, and they essentially, they're part administrative assistant, they are part project manager, they are part client communications, they're even part collections process. But this need of, hey, how can we get this non-billable stuff that's off our billable team into the hands of some very capable teammates, so our billable people are able to do the work that truly they can do in the compliance or in the consulting, and let these other rock stars handle all this other stuff. And so it was truly Liz's brainchild that she sort of come up with. And I think now, I think we may have six, I
I
could be
think
off,
that's
but
right.
somewhere between 5 and 7, something like that. That help our various quarterbacks execute on the projects and making sure our clients are happy and the work's getting in the door and then back out on time.
Yeah, and I really like that. You said something early on that was really critical for this thing to even work, though, and that is you must be honest. Because if you're not honest with yourself, you're not going to be honest with everybody else, and you're going to allow yourself to be form fitted into a role where you may have elements of that role that won't allow you to flourish to your greatest capacity, and in some cases may undermine you. Uh, Seen it way too many times. And so talk about how what we've done, and Thrive With Her had something to do with it, but talk about what we did with our quarterbacks versus tax managers. So we had an inflection point, right? Where we had some people like quarterbacks more dealing with clients and more interaction day to day, more coordination versus give me 3 screens and just leave me alone, right?
Right. Right. I think we had a couple of conversations, or probably a dozen conversations, that led us to this meeting where it was like, okay, let's make some actual decisions. What are the main responsibilities of a quarterback? And for us, that's essentially like your account manager, your client relationship manager, whatever the terminology is in yours, but really owns that relationship with the client to make sure it's a success. Um, Versus what we call a tax lead, which is really kind of the project manager, if you will, specifically around our tax compliance work. So a quarterback could be overseeing a tax teammate and a test teammate, think financial statements, and then a bookkeeping teammate, as well as kind of working with the QBC on top of some staff beneath all of those levels. But we had this conversation where it was, okay, what are our main priorities for the quarterback versus what are our main priorities for the tax lead? Because there had been an ongoing debate of, well, whose job actually is it to make sure that a tax return goes out on time, that it meets our turnaround time deadline that we've set for ourselves internally? Is it the tax lead? Is it the quarterback? And if we're having this conversation at the leadership team, you best believe the rest of the firm has no clue what's going on and that there's mass confusion because we don't even know for ourselves.
Yeah.
So, just sort of continuing to push for that clarity that we were able to provide in the various roles, has also been impactful for us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what I like about it is the fact that like we're not doing, yeah, we may do various personality tests based on the role and that sort of thing. And you could probably even game those a little bit, but and it's not the hiring criteria per se, but what we do want a candidate to do is reveal like what is it that you really love to do, because even though this may be the role and we can't really change much of the mechanics of that role, at least we know, hey, this might be a future track of where you want to go,
Right.
which is really important. if people don't have a vision of where they want to go or what is possible, then they'll burn out and then they'll leave. And so I think that's a big thing that we want to do. Um,
Hang on, Gary,
also,
I'm
yeah,
gonna jump in real quick. Even I'm going to use our tax department as an example. Even within our tax team, we've even broken it down further to be like, do you want the client communication, or do you truly just
yes,
want to sit down and be heads down, let me crank out the tax returns, actually do the work, but you over there get to handle all the client communication. Let me just live in tax returns all day long. So even kind of taking it down a further notch to be like, do you want the communication? Do you just want the projects? Do you want a little bit of both? But allowing people to sort of say, hey, I enjoy the client communication. I love being able to interact with them. And we've also got some that are like, can I not talk to any? And can I just sit here and just crank out as many as I can? And we need both. So
yeah,
sure, if you'll tell us what you want, we're going to work the best we can to make sure you get to do what you want to.
yeah. That was such a cool experience because it's not limiting. Like a person that runs a very large department for us elected to not be a quarterback, even though this individual is actually a very good quarterback. But their happy zone is in knocking stuff out and not talking that much. Okay, cool. We've got another person in our audit department that said, yeah, sometimes I wish people could just read my mind so I didn't have to speak. I can't relate to that, but it's like, I love it. We need people like that, right? So um, that is an area that I want you guys to think about on this Thrive With Her. How does that silence imposter syndrome? That's probably a question. If you haven't been thinking about it, you should be. And it's pretty simple. I want you to think about when you've been in a high flow state, like when you're just in the zone, like time just doesn't seem to be moving. And before you know it, the day's gone because you've just been in the zone. Or if, you're working on something and your spouse or somebody is yelling at you and you can't hear them because you're just focused. That's Thrive Zone. And when you're in Thrive Zone, the imposter syndrome just isn't chirping because you're just like you're in the flow, man. You're just enjoying it. But when you're doing stuff that is dragging you down, or you feel like you're completely incompetent, but you're being pushed into it, it raises the awareness of, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really not happy. And then you start comparing versus a high achiever and something else. And that's danger zone because internally it just starts making you wither. So that's that weapon in particular. It's a really simple weapon. So if you guys have any questions along the way, hit us up. Just don't harass Rachel on the chat. Like I had to get her on here. So
Please.
do not harass her on the chat. You can harass me. You actually harass Adam or or Jack
That's a
because
good
they aren't here.
idea.
It'd be
Yes.
fun. Uh, it might be fun to just see if they're paying attention and if they've watched the video that we do as a replay on YouTube later on. But let's go to weapon number 4, which is uh, has to do with the conversation that I had with Rachel about her nervousness of being on this thing. Um, Rachel, can you just kind of hit the nugget of weapon number 4?
Yes. And I think this is one that has helped me too, stepping into an HR role without really a true HR background. But and I'll forgive me if I misquote the weapon, but essentially
That's
focus on
fine.
serving others, not how they perceive you.
You
So,
nailed it.
yay,
You nailed it.
I did my homework. Public speaking is not my forte, and while I can only thankfully see myself and Gary on my screen, still knowing that there are other people out there and that this will end up on YouTube, is absolutely terrifying for me. I've got the childhood horror stories of Tomato Face or whatever, that I will spare you the details of, but like it just, oh, always dread it, always get nervous, always really have to work on my deep breaths before I start. And so when Gary asked me to do this, I mean, I literally laughed at the message, like, oh, that's a crazy idea you have there, Gary. Um, and so he said, "Hey, just, remember this. It's truly just to serve." And I was like, "You're right. You know what? I absolutely have suffered myself from imposter syndrome at the same time. I can be very honest about my own situation. And if that does the smallest little bit of help to someone, like, then it's worth it." So, and also, couldn't say no to Gary. He's been great to me. So this was the least I could do for him.
You are a good colleague. I really appreciate that. Um, and hopefully this is serving somebody today. I'm really hoping that even if you knew what imposter syndrome was or you've suffered from it, that it still gives you some practical tools. And if this is like a foreign language to you, just realize that if you care about people, including your family members, including the people that are in your office and in your work environment, at least 70% of them are dealing with this. And nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. I mentioned Tana Green and her, inspiration, and actually it was the spark that lit the fire for me. Um, what she did in that book to reveal things that she kept hidden that she was always like suffering from because she had to put on a plastic fantastic face out here. And if you know her, like she's just exuberant. She's got high energy. She calls it strikes and balls and strikes very well. She doesn't pussyfoot around it, but like she deals with the hard issues, but she has so much grace in what she does. But for her to do that, I'm like, man, oh man, that takes a lot of courage. And we all have those things. And I'm not saying you just go and broadcast your dirty laundry to the world. Like, what's the point of that? But a lot of times that when we keep stuff in that we're really ashamed of or whatever, we're carrying it around like an albatross around our neck. For me, even talking about my partner embezzlement, like that doesn't define me, but I couldn't talk about it for a long time because I felt embarrassment. How could I have this happen with a guy that was 20 years older than me that I trusted like a father right under my nose? How in the world? I must be just a major loser. That's how I felt until I actually told somebody. They're like, it just didn't add up. Like, why would you leave your own firm in Wichita to come to Charlotte, North Carolina? Besides the fact that we have trees and hills and that we're closer to the ocean and, all of that. Like, yeah, those are really good things. But there was a reason. And one person, like, and I was fairly new to Charlotte at the time. This was in 1994. Um, he said, well, what's the real deal? And I told him, and he goes, oh man, that's happened to me too. Like, what? I thought I was the only one, weapon number one. But this thing, weapon number three, is called shine a light on it, which is like talk about and expose it. It doesn't have to define you. Tana's past does not define her, but it's no longer shackling her. And for me, I was a college dropout. All right, so I'm the only college dropout, non-CPA partner at a CPA firm. Well, that's not something that you just want to go around talking about. And I couldn't talk about that at Bank of America because I was a senior vice president. I was over all of business marketing for Bank of America. People that worked for me, including Andy Hilliard, who has a MBA from Northwestern. And I love Andy. He's a client of ours and he's still a friend. And I had to fire him. Like, what? What? Yeah, I had to fire him because he just wasn't. He was breaking too much glass because he's an entrepreneur and he was getting hamstrung by this big machine. And we moved a lot faster then than I think they move now. But nonetheless, like that was a really hard thing. But then he got freed up and he went out and doubled his salary within weeks. and, and now he owns a really nice firm, a really nice company. But the issue is, I couldn't talk about it there. I couldn't, like, people talk about Yale and places that worked for me, and I just talk about, yeah, went to Kansas State, but then if they wanted, and I was just hoping and praying they didn't ask me when I graduated. So, but what I found is it's extremely liberating. Like, just go be yourself and do what you're called to do. The chips fall as they may, and you're going to be good. You wouldn't believe how many business owners that we deal with early on when they become very comfortable with us, like, I didn't even, I barely finished high school. And some of our most successful ones are that. They came from some crazy backgrounds, barely finished high school, and yet created these amazing companies. But they at one point had to realize, it's okay to say that instead of try to fake it. So I hope that that resonates with you. The other thing that I want to talk about a little bit, Rachel, is with our leadership team, we're really trying to hold ourselves accountable even higher, right? And so we've got accountability buddies that we check in with in the morning and at night, and we deal with two things: a gratitude, something that you're grateful for about the company or about our teammates or something like that, and what's our priority for the day. And then at the end, what are we grateful for? And then also, how do we do? It's kind of it, right? Talk about gratitude, Rachel, and what we've tried to not just institutionalize, but really live it. And do you have any examples, whether it be in your own life or in the lives of teammates, think about Adam or anybody else, where you've seen changes because of gratitude?
Um, I'm a big believer in gratitude. Like I hope that the people that work with me would say, "Oh yeah, she says thank you a lot." Like
Mm-hmm.
it comes out very naturally for me because I truly am appreciative, but it's also something that I want to make sure people know, hey, job well done, or you got that done ahead of time, like anything very simple. So I think when I think about sort of this new routine that we've instituted on our leadership team with the morning and the evening, it's funny. We have an odd number, so Adam doesn't actually have an accountability buddy, so he'll post his stuff in our chat. And so it was early on, and I forgot who it was or what the situation was, but he was like, I'm grateful that so and so did blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and yes, Rachel, I've already told them the same thing. And I was like, good job, Adam. Because it's one thing for me to sit down here and write out, hey, I so and so gave me a really nice compliment. Like I just really appreciated that they acknowledged something that I did. It's another thing for me to turn around and be like, thank you for saying that, like, and actually acknowledging the situation. Um, I just think it's really powerful. I even had somebody that reports to me had done something, and Adam went to her after the fact and said, I really appreciate that you did this. And she came to me and said, you know, I wasn't looking for a thank you. I wasn't expecting a thank you. She was like, but it meant a lot that Adam acknowledged that I had done that. And she was like, it was just so simple. And I didn't even know I needed it. But I'm really grateful that he did it. And it's just so powerful how something even, it's so small, like it's so small and it's so easy, but can make such a huge difference. And even on the hard days, me and my accountability buddy have both sent a message where it was like, today was hard to think of something to be grateful for. Like it was just a challenging day, or I didn't get done the stuff I wanted to, or I fell short somewhere. But it's like, no, I can still find something, I'm grateful to have a job like that. That's okay. It's still, I can still acknowledge, even as hard as today was, I'm grateful that I had a job to come home to or come home from today. So I think adjusting your perspective to sort of find the good. And there's research out there, like your thoughts control your feelings, and that obviously can control your work. So, there's the business mindset behind it too. Um, but also, who doesn't love a thank you? Like, if you went and asked your employees, yes, some might say, no, just give me more money. But I'm willing to bet they all appreciate the acknowledgement of a thank you too. So something so simple is so powerful.
It is so simple. I did the same thing. I found because of my accountability buddy, another partner at the firm, she had told me about the work of another colleague. And so I called the colleague and I said, hey, I just want you to know I'm really thankful for what you've done because it's really helped her while she's been in, dealing with a lot of work. So I just want to say thank you. And I found out last night that, I guess it was last night, that it just blew this, her colleague away. And they're in a different office than us. They're in one of our satellite offices. But I'm like, it doesn't take much. Well, so here's the question. How does gratitude silence imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome usually focuses on what we don't have. It usually focuses on the deficit. Oh, and there's a great book back there called The Gap and the Gain. Highly recommend it. And its gap mentality is what am I missing? And you'll never achieve your greatness with that. Or gain mentality is, but look at where we've come from and how far we've come. At least we're making progress. Yeah, we're not still where we want to be. And that's where, like, this gratitude journal, 3 entries in it every day. That was the best thing that I got out of a really amazing experience at the BB&T Leadership Institute. 12 grand for it for a whole week. And the best thing that I got out of it was 3 entries in a gratitude journal. I'm grateful for ... followed by a thought or a prayer. I'm religious about it. And it just really is an amazing thing. Before we hit the end of the hour, I want to talk briefly, Rachel, about something that we instituted that I think you guys should look at if you're looking at engagement, because ironically, we just had our employee engagement survey through Standout 2.0. That's anonymous. It's truly anonymous,
I
which is
promise
really
it
cool.
is.
Yeah, it's truly anonymous. Rachel and HR doesn't have the back end keys to look at who responded this way or that way. And our performance as leaders is largely tied to that, which is interesting. So talk a little bit about what Standout 2.0 is, what it's doing for us. And it's not that expensive. I think we spend a few $1,000s a year for it.
Yeah, it's fairly inexpensive, all things considered. So Standout is a tool that Gary actually kind of presented to a few of us several years ago. It was right before COVID happened. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
5 years
and
ago.
it is really just in sort of an engagement tool, like Gary said. So you take an initial assessment kind of based off strengths finders. There's 9 strengths and it kind of identifies your top 2. It gives you sort of coaching based off what your top 2 strengths are. There's a weekly check-in that your manager gets, and then we do it quarterly, but you can set it up to be how you want it. An engagement pulse that I promise is truly anonymous if my team is watching. But what I truly believe this is what, I mean, I could say changed my life, but got me in the role that I'm in with HR. So in the weekly check-ins, mine have been going to Gary and would just, what did you love about this week? What did you loathe? Did you get your priorities done? What are your priorities for next week? And then do you need any help from your director going into next week? Or do you have any additional questions? And so in true Rachel fashion, very honest. And here you go, Gary, you asked, I'm going to tell you. And so Gary's laughing because it's true. But not only did I feel like it helped sort of just open a dialogue for me to have with Gary about, whether it was a hard conversation I needed to have, um, but also where was I really enjoying the things that made me come alive? Like, what were those? And what were sort of the things that I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going through the motions a little bit, didn't really love it. And I think Gary, over time picked up on it. And so we knew we were in a position where, hey, this HR chunk world needed to come off an employee so they could truly focus on another aspect of their role, and let that be their main sole focus. And so Gary said, well, what do you think about it? And I was like, huh, well, I don't know, it sounds a little scary. And so I gave it some thought and we had some conversation, and I'm pretty sure there was at least one or two versions of a Thrive Wither during that process. And minus this one section of my job that still absolutely terrifies me, but I'm gaining confidence in. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I again was fortunate enough that I had a boss and Gary and a business, a firm that was willing to say, hey, well, let's make this change and give her the opportunity. And now I'm 2.5 years in, and I am so fulfilled in what I do. And I feel like this is where I should have been all along. Now, I can also look back and be like, okay, it was good that I was in that position for a little bit because it built some relationships that are helping me now. Or it's good that I was in that position because I learned some things that are giving me perspective now. At the same time, I'm like, I think I tell Gary probably once a month in my standout now, like, I'm so thankful for this opportunity to have this job. And again, it's not all glamorous. There are some days that
Yeah.
absolutely suck. Um, but I feel like I am right where I'm supposed to be. And it was because I was honest, somewhat to a fault, in the work that I was doing, again, be it good or bad. So I truly think that that weekly dialogue that we use Stand Out for is how I got to be where I am.
So real quick, for anybody that's asking, like, how long does it take you to fill out the standout, which is on our app? Um, how long each week?
If I'm worked up about something, it may take 5 minutes. If it was a fairly, somewhat non tense week, maybe two. And
Yeah.
then I've got some that report to me too. And even looking at theirs, again, maybe 2 minutes per individual, maybe. It may warrant a follow-up conversation again if there's something that they were worked up over.
Sure.
But it is not a significant investment in time. Yet I can also say again, now that I have people that I'm looking at theirs and they're sending me their stuff, it's helped me to be like, oh, you liked that project? Okay, great. I can give you a little bit more. Oh, you didn't like this. Okay, well, maybe I should give her a little bit less of this, but I know she likes that, so I can load her up over here. So again, them having the honest feedback to me and me being able to give the honest feedback, total game changer.
Yeah. And it's so simple. When I saw it, I'm like, oh, love sounds a whole lot like thrive. Oh, loathe. Oh, hey, that sounds a whole like
Right,
wither.
right.
There's nothing new under the sun. So, Rachel, you did a great job. Thank you. I'm not saying that to, you know, make you smile. I'm just telling you, you did a great job today. I hope you had fun. I know it was kind of quiet from the gallery today. It'll be more lively, I'm sure, next week when Adam and Jack are back throwing grenades just to see what happens.
Yes.
Um, we'll have a lot of fun then too. Anybody that came on late, if you missed something, we'll put it up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel. And knowing Jack, they'll probably do the same thing on Shoemaker, even though he did get a hall pass for today. So thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully, we're bringing value. And Rachel, thank you. And thank you for showcasing our new space. It'll be fun.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thanks,
Gary.
Will. See y'all. Bye bye.